Okay,
We are
great.
now we are now recording.
Yeah, Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone attending tonight. I will say that I can only see my presentation, so I can't really see myself or anyone else or the chat. Please feel free to interrupt or throw out any questions at any time. I really welcome conversation and participation if you would prefer that. If I will try to monitor how fast I speak. I tend to speak a little bit quickly, so I will try to make sure that everyone can hear me. Again, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Steph McDonald from SafeInHome. Little quick background on myself. I originally come from New York, where I worked several years with adults and children with autism in BOCES. It's similar to the NEIUs here, special education centers. From there, I went to be a residential coordinating director over several group homes, residential homes throughout Sullivan and Orange County. And then I moved over to Pennsylvania a couple decades ago, where I was a supports coordinator. I ran a few day programs. I was a behavior specialist and a supports coordinator after that. And then I finally was a residential director over quite a few large group homes and dabbled in life sharing as well. So I often say there's not much I haven't seen or have experience with. And this is a field that's absolutely near and dear to my heart in many, many ways. So thank you again for having me and allowing me to talk to you about remote sports. I'm going to go to our next slide, hopefully, if it will allow me. There we are. So remote supports, that is our primary service that we do provide through SafeInHome. And think of that as empowering people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live independently in their own homes and communities while using this remote supports and assistive technology. So our main goal is to make sure that people live out the lives that they want to, that are person-centered, that they can do safely. And we recognize that that might not look the same for everyone, but it's something that is very important to everyone. When I talk about remote supports to our individuals and our families, I often say, think of a remote support staff person as just that, a staff person that's just not in the room with you. So they do that via connecting through the different assistive technologies. And we'll get into different examples about that. So we always like to clarify the 5 elements of remote support. So as always, with every services, that starts first and foremost with the individual. A lot of times we'll ask families or providers will ask, can you give us a list of all your technology or all your services? And we don't do that for a variety of reasons, because first and foremost, it starts with that individual and what they need, how they need to be supported within their life. And that's done differently in conjunction with different technologies and support plans. So there isn't one cookie cutter type of example. Because what might work for Johnny is not going to work for Sally. And we really like to meet with that person and their support circle and families and the environment that they need support in to develop a plan that works best for them. And that's a fluid plan that can change at any time and be updated at any time. So first and foremost, the individual. Then we have our remote support staff. So that staff person that is in a HIPAA compliant center. And I know that a lot of people, remote support staffing is a very new service. We recently became an approved ODP provider with about a year now. And it's not a traditional service that people often think of right away. There's a lot of questions, and that's understandable. But our remote support staff all work in a HIPAA compliance center. They actually work in Arizona and California. They receive our individual support ISPs, any other documentation that would help provide the best services to them that any other staff person would need, whether it be a behavioral support plan. Our remote support staff attend to all ISPs and IDTs. They generally get a very good practical knowledge of what is important to that person and how to best provide their services as outlined in their care plan. Every individual that comes on board with us gets a care plan, and that's almost like a mini ISP that we develop as a team with the individual and their providers, family supports, whomever they consider to be an important entity in their life that they follow and are able to deliver services to. So when that person either contacts remote supports or remote supports contacts that individual, it'll come up on a big screen and a picture of them will be present with a couple key phrases or code words that might be important in that moment. For instance, there's an individual we support with her hygiene, and she does not like the word shower. You cannot say the word shower to this individual. She will become very upset. So it'll say, don't say the word shower when speaking with Sally. And that's important. Although individuals have been trained on her, that's something that we really, really want to ensure that we follow through on. A lot of times we do get the questions, do you always get the same remote support staff? The answer is no, but it is that, the individuals that provide services in the same particular areas are generally the same group. So we're across, I think, 15 to 16 states now in the United States, but we have the same core group of staff that, work within, the certain parts of Pennsylvania. So even when I call in and I do demos and things like that, you get to know everyone very well. So it's kind of similar to that of maybe a residential group home where it's not always the same person on shift, but it's people that you're familiar with. So, and we do have individuals that might have favorite staff, they have hung up on people to call back for their favorite staff later on, and that does happen. So that's a remote support staff. The other important element we have is, of course, the assistive technologies down in the right-hand corner there. And most often, the two most frequently used items, obviously, are the tablet, similar to that of an iPad, and that's a two-way tablet. We have one that goes via Wi-Fi, and we do have a cellular tablet in the event that there's an issue with the Wi-Fi. Sometimes in rural areas, it might be a concern, so there is that option, or if individuals are going between different locations, they might need a cellular connection. And it's important so that, remote support staff can get a visual on the individual and that person can see with whom they're talking. A lot of times individuals process things better if they can see the person speaking directly with them. We also have that geocom there. That is kind of like that beeper type device. And that's our second most common, most frequently utilized piece of assistive technology. That's a cellular device as well. You can use it wherever a cell phone works, whether it's at home or in the community. And just at a push of a button, it's walkie-talkie both ways. Only people that are programmed into that geocom can contact that geocom, so you can't just hand out that number to anyone. It can connect to remote support staff or natural staff and provider staff. It also has a geolocation component that comes with it. When you push that button, it sends out the actual geolocation that that individual is in via a text, and it'll send you directions to right where they are. And that's a handy device to help individuals, whether they're at home or navigating throughout the community. We also have other devices such as the video doorbell. It allows people to see who's coming and going from their home. We have the Echo Dot there. We have technology that can be utilized for individuals that have seizure disorders. It is important to note, though, it's seizures with movement, tonic-clonic, not staring seizures, and a variety of other technologies. We have over 60 pieces of technology that we can use in conjunction with a person's care plan. One of our other most important types of technology in the left-hand corner there is our sensor technology. And that little like golf ball thing, that detects movement or lack thereof. And that's important for individuals that we might be doing active monitoring on the overnights. We can see as they're getting up and out of their room, but not with a camera. Like we cannot determine or see that individual, so it respects their privacy. We also have water sensors and temperature sensors. So, there was an individual we were supporting that really loved flushing his action figures and wrestling figures down the toilet. This became a very expensive bill for Roto-Rooter. So we had put in a water sensor, and he was able to, we were able to identify when that was occurring and kind of stop that. Not so wonderful practice he was engaging in. Door sensors and window sensors, stovetop sensors, perhaps an individual is learning to cook and there's some concern whether or not they might not shut off the stove in a proper time, and bed movement sensors. Up in the upper right-hand corner there is an example of our weekly data reports. So every interaction an individual has with our remote support staff is documented by our remote support staff. So if Johnny's calling in at 3 in the morning, if they need to have a discussion regarding, perhaps he opened his door and we're not sure why, they document that in the notes. And those data weekly reports are available to the supports coordinator and any other team member or family member weekly through an access of a confidential link. So you can see everything that they had discussed. This is also really good for individuals with a care plan that might be documenting medical concerns or needs. A lot of our individuals might have weekly check-in or daily medical check-ins. We do assist individuals with blood pressure checks or insulin checks of those natures that can be documented and then brought to an individual's doctor. We've helped individuals with adjusting their medications because perhaps we didn't realize Johnny was up all night and we had to adjust the medications that he was on. So we brought our weekly data reports to his treating psychiatrist, and he was able to collect that and see what was going on. Okay. This is just a quick example of how the technology works. Each blue dot there is representative of a type of technology within the home. So in the living room there, by those two white chairs, there might be the tablet there. There might be a couple sensors throughout. When we try to monitor an individual on the overnights, we put sensors throughout different locations of the home so we can see as the individual navigates. We have the smart buttons. Perhaps an individual has a fall risk, so we put one of those in the bathroom by the toilet to make sure that if they do have an emergency where they've fallen and can't get up, they can push that button to connect to remote support staff. All of that technology works in conjunction to go towards the remote support staff, and they'll follow that care plan for the next action, whether it's calling a family member. Obviously, if it raises to a concern that is an extreme life or death emergency, they will always immediately call 911 to get services out there. Recently, we were on a team meeting where they were doing a check-in for something not health related. An individual, I think, was getting ready for the day and eating his breakfast and ended up kind of choking. He started, and they were not talking properly on the phone call. So they immediately called 911. The cops and ambulance were arrived and they were able to help him through that. So that was a very scary and very real situation, but it was something we were able to support that individual, thankfully, in that moment. Here we have a couple of examples of supporting lifetime goals for independence that we will talk about in our examples. So first and foremost, we really like to support independence across various settings and scenarios. It's something that's important to our individuals and it looks different for everyone. Perhaps someone might be working on a skill set towards eventually moving out and they need to come up with a skill set of cleaning their apartment. That might be okay. Every Tuesday night, we're calling Johnny because we know that garbage goes out on Wednesdays. And in his care plan, we work through him in opening up the fridge, checking if there's any rotten food, going through the kitty litter. And then you can have the next day, whereas, it's the day that we change all the linens in our bed. So whatever that looks like for that individual, we will work on those goals together. Second, obviously, goal attainment. Our plans, our care plans are if we're doing exactly what we do, ultimately, there will be no need for us in the end. But, we want to ensure that we're working on realistic goals. And oftentimes, every plan we put in place needs tweaking because perhaps Johnny did get really good at throwing the garbage out. What's our next step? And we can change that at any time. Enhancing self-reliance and self-confidence. A lot of times we want to check with someone before we do something. How many times do we quick call a friend before a major decision? A lot of our individuals rely on that of our family members, mom, dad, siblings, staff. Like, can I do this? Can I, what would, so instead of perhaps doing that with that family person, they can then call remote supports instead and kind of rely on themselves and kind of get that second nature instead and confidence. We like to encourage communication skills. A lot of our individuals grow up with technology in today's day and age, in the educational system, as well as the years that have progressed, technology is everywhere. You can't go anywhere without seeing someone with a cell phone. All the students have tablets at school. It's something that comes second nature. I do joke, I thought I was tech savvy until my young daughter, I need her assistance to, watch what I need to do on TV because it's through some app. But we'd be surprised. I've gone out to many times to assist individuals to show them the technology we use. And it's the individuals themselves where they can that's setting up the Wi-Fi password on my devices. It's second nature to them and they're very comfortable with it. So it does encourage that communication skill and technology of speaking with someone over a tablet is not a foreign concept these days. It's not scary. Again, we like to promote self-advocacy. A lot of the individuals are very, very good and strong self-advocates if given the opportunity. It's a very wonderful thing. We want to continue to promote that. If they're the only ones speaking with that individual, there's no one speaking for them in that moment. They have to communicate that out to them. That's a concept that we're trying to work on. and bridging the gap in staffing and natural supports. So obviously, coming out of this COVID era, I was talking about earlier today. We had a staffing crisis in a lot of providers prior to COVID, and then once COVID hit, the DSP shortage rate went up to 44%. We have recovered a little bit from that, but it's nowhere near what it was years and years ago. That's honestly a fight that we're trying to look to increase wages, and the new governor has done a beautiful job of trying to make sure that all of our families and individuals have more increased funds, more so than any recent years. However, that gap is still there, and it's very prominent and pronounced within the residential settings and in the supported living settings, especially on certain shifts. It's very easy to find staff and people that would like to work the typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5. But families very typically are expressing to us that it's really hard to find that evening coverage, weekend coverage, and overnight coverage. So we try to come up with creative solutions for that. We have never in all of our years in Safe and Home displaced the job of a staff person or a DSP, but we just try to bridge that coverage where we can. And oftentimes, you might find individuals might not need a staff person always there. Like if they're sitting on the couch watching TV, does that other staff person need to sit there watch TV with them? Do they want someone that's kind of invading the privacy of their home in that current moment? Or do they have the option to contact remote supports if they feel a need to do so instead of having someone in their home with them at that time? And maybe that staff person can go where there's a greater need. Maybe there's someone else that does truly require in-person support at that time. So we have a couple of support solutions here. And one thing I want to touch on that I kind of forgot to is there's two types of remote supports. So the first traditional sense of remote supports is check-in calls. And we do that, let's say, for our examples here, youth transition. Perhaps you have someone that is now graduating from high school and they're going home earlier during the day. Right now, we have a lot of gaps in support programs, especially day programs following COVID. So, in hours that they might have been at school or maybe mom or dad aren't home, we have the ability to check in with them. Maybe as soon as they get home or off the bus, if that particular person does that, they call in with remote support, say, hey, I made it home. And they might check in again later on. So there might be a scheduled check-in time, or perhaps with medication management, an individual might take their medication at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So we have scheduled check-in calls every day for about an hour or so where we call in and say, hey, Johnny, did you take your meds? Can I see how you feeling? And if they're calling every day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., that's considered check-in times. There's scheduled hours for that. And then we have remote active monitoring. And that would be a remote support staff person is actively monitoring someone for their health and safety during set scheduled times, most typically on the overnights. Let's say from 10 a.m. or I apologize, 10 p.m. to like 7 a.m. They might be monitoring the individual while they're sleeping at home. And we can get into examples for that. We also have what's called support on demand. And that's more so for individuals that like to call and check in frequently, but don't have those schedules times, whether it's a scheduled 1 or 2 times a day or an active monitoring type situation. And clearly, though, if an individual active, support on demand does come also with those check-in calls. And what I mean by that is if someone wants to call remote supports and it's not a scheduled check-in time, they can do so anytime, any day. It doesn't have to be scheduled and they'll always pick up. It could be, Christmas 3 a.m. or Sunday 10 a.m. There's no call-offs. They can always reach someone on remote support staffing. So here are a couple of support solutions I want to go over briefly, just to give examples of how we support individuals. Like I said earlier, youth transition is for those, that subset of individuals that are now not really being supported. They might have aged out of school and they've graduated and they're kind of maybe they're hooking up with OVR and they're learning to travel train within the community. They could get a geocom and be able to assist with that. There was an individual recently where they had a geocom and they had gotten on the wrong bus. They were learning the route. And unfortunately, they got on the wrong bus. So they were panicked, rightfully so. They used their geocom and remote support staff were able to find them. I'm not sure how they did this, but they were able to connect with the bus driver, stop, get that person on the right route and be on their merry way. It was a very beautiful thing. So this is something we were helping that individual with learning how to travel train. And, think about how many times, as we're learning throughout our lives when we were driving or trying to learn the community, we made mistakes. If I was only allowed to make one mistake ever driving or getting on the bus and never allowed to do so again, I would never have gotten my license. So this is a normal thing that we want to encourage our individuals and loved ones to be able to do, with the support as much as we can to ensure their health and safety. Medication management, I have an example later in the slide regarding that. We do assist, that's probably one of our more common requests for services, is where oftentimes we'll see that an individual is very capable, lives independently, but just struggles with consistently taking medications. And we have several solutions in place where we can help an individual with that. We have a medium security pill dispenser. And how that works, it's a small round disc, and within that you can preload medications, and it will go off at predetermined set times. So let's say Johnny does take his meds at 7 and 7. It will go off at 7 a.m. for 1 hour very loudly. It is a very loud alarm. Johnny will then have to go over, pick up his medication dispenser, turn it over, have the pills come out, turn it back over and place it back on the hard surface, and then it'll stop going off. Johnny will then take his medications. In the event Johnny does not, after that hour is up, the medication pill dispenser will rotate to the next slot, and those meds will stay in there until that locked is unlocked and they're reloading their medications. And then that person's loved one or provider staff can say, oh, hey, look at this. Johnny missed his meds on this day and this day. What was going on there? We want to make sure that Johnny doesn't overdose. You can't double take your meds in that instance. We also have a high security pill dispenser. That's kind of for individuals that might be in a location where we're worried, perhaps maybe those meds might go missing or might be walking. It's a very intensive locked case to ensure the safety and security of those medications. That is rarely used, but it is something we do have available. And what's nice about the medication dispenser is you can take it on the go. Let's say Johnny has to take meds at 3, but he's working that day. He can bring that with him if he so chooses. We could pair that with check-in calls at those times, like I said, where staff can see Johnny, make sure he's taking his meds, and just build that independence instead of relying on others. Overnight support is another example of how we support individuals. We have oftentimes a lot of our individuals do want to live out on their own. They're excited to do so, but the evenings can be a scary time. Often I have individuals that become afraid over inclement weather. They just get afraid. Some of our individuals, due to budgetary restrictions, might not live in the best neighborhoods. They want to make sure that they can reach anyone at any time. And that's more for, mental health purposes and stability. We have another example of overnight support later in the slide, but one particular one we have of overnight support is when, that peace of mind for when there's not necessarily in-person staff available. And I did talk about this earlier with another parent, where I have individuals that receive their checks and they'll hit at midnight. And she doesn't live in a great area. And so she'll run over to the ATM as soon as her check hits to pull that money out and go either give money out or bring people back to her apartment. And it's just not a safe scenario or financially stable for her. She can't afford to be doing that. So we have worked really well together in that she will contact remote supports when it hits, talk about her anxieties with that, and we've saved quite a bit of money and have made some healthier life decisions in regards to that. Visitor safety is another support that we also offer. With visitor safety, it comes in 2 realms. I support someone on my caseload where he has a PFA against some family members. So remote support staff have pictures of those individuals, and they know that should they show up, they are to immediately contact the police. Also, individuals that are living out on their own for the first time, if they're nervous about that, if they are kind of hesitant to see who may or may not be at the door, if you install one of our video doorbells, we can have that feed go directly to your tablet, in which that individual can see who's coming and going and whether or not they feel comfortable opening it. Obviously, if they don't know who's at the door, they don't have to. They can either talk to remote supports about this or a family member. Remote support staffs aren't the only people that might have access to that feed. Sometimes family members can also access that via an app on their phone as well, so they can see who's coming and going. or even see it when their individuals leaving, or perhaps when provider staff might be coming to the home. We had a gentleman who was getting very worried because his mother was frequently buying things from Amazon and all sorts of Temu, all that jazz, and he was just very paranoid about it. So we had set him up with a video doorbell and the tablet, and that calmed him down tremendously. He was able to kind of navigate through that, and it was something that helped his mental health. Elopement mitigation, wandering is another support we try to help families and individuals with. I frequently tell this story in my trainings because it's very near and dear to my heart. There is a grandmother, a very elderly grandmother I supported when I first arrived here at SafeInHome, and she is taking care of her very tall and large grandson who is diagnosed with autism. He has very limited verbal skills. He is quite large and he's very muscular, and he does elope during the night and into the neighbors' homes. So she was very concerned about this. She wasn't sure in today's day and age how the neighbors were going to react. One or two neighbors in particular were very frustrated and upset with this scenario, as you can imagine, and rightfully so. You know, he looks as though he's a much larger man and he's not communicating properly. That can be a very scary thing for the neighbors, for this individual, and for the grandmother. She was adamant that she wanted to continue to care for him at her home. So we were kind of at our wits' end here. So we met with her. We came out to the home. What we had done for this particular individual, we'll call him Johnny again, we had installed a bed pad sensor. We then installed an open door sensor on his bedroom door and several sensors throughout his house. It's a 2-story house, so we had sensors going all the way down, and as well as a video camera. We also installed an Echo Dot. So when any sensor was activated, when he opened his bedroom door, it very loudly said, Johnny's bedroom door is open. And when he passed through certain things, it would very loudly announce when he opened or passed through things. So the second, and I don't know if I had said this, I apologize. The grandmother was then sleeping at the front door, not in her own bed, for years upon years, in the event of trying to stop him before getting out, because he just didn't have any overnight staffing or support outside of the grandmother. So once we had installed all this, his care plan said that once he got up out of bed, like once he got up, we would call the grandmother, because he didn't usually get up to use the bathroom. That didn't happen. He only gets up very often, very few and far between to elope. So once he got out of bed, we immediately called the grandmother. Remote supports actively monitors him from the hours of, I think, 9 to 5 a.m. So once he opened his bedroom door, we're then calling the next point of contact. If he made it down the hallway and no one picked up, we immediately called the local police department, and they were aware of this. This has been extremely successful. The grandmother is in her bed at night. This is a lovely peace of mind for her. I mean, a woman of this age should really be sleeping in her bed, not have to have, that weight on her. A lot of the supports are obviously geared towards our individuals, but it's also helping their loved ones. We kind of try to provide that peace of mind. Caregiver burnout is very real. It was at an all-time high during and throughout and after COVID. So this is something where if we can provide additional supports where we can, so that you can be the best version of you during other hours, we're going to try to do that. And it worked out very successfully for this individual. Other individuals, we also put the video doorbell on. We could see which way Johnny went, what was he wearing, things along those lines. But that's one support we have in place for Johnny. He got smarter. Johnny, upped the ante a little bit and then tried to go out his window in the hallway. So we added the sensors. And that's just an example of, the plans are fluid. What can we do to help adjust? Things change. How can we always make sure that we're doing our best we can to ensure his health and safety, and make sure he's still living at home in the community where it is important for him, for his family. Kitchen safety is another example. We do have, I think I already mentioned it, the stovetop sensors. If an individual is learning to cook and it shuts off after a certain amount of time if it's left unattended. We have seizure management. We have a watch wristband that individuals can wear. It only works for individuals with that movement, that tonic-clonic movement, and it measures the frequency, duration, and intensity of a seizure. All that data is kept in those weekly report logs, and that can be made available to the individual's family, their physicians, their neurologist. We also have a seizure bed pad as well. I will say it can be a little bit noisy sometimes, so individuals get irritated, but it's worked out for many individuals. In addition to the seizure pad, we also have the CO2 and carbon monoxide detectors, and we have for individuals that might be hard of hearing or deaf, it connects to that with a shake pad sensor too. So if you're a heavy sleeper as well, that could work. In addition to also an alarm pad, so that can go where you set certain alarms. I have an individual that got a scholarship to a local community college to complete a program, and he was not doing well. He was flunking out because he could not get up. And mom and dad worked in the morning. So we had set up, and he had agreed to this, where, we'll call him Paul. Like we have the bed pad on his mattress, and it goes off 2 or 3 times. And after it goes off after half an hour, remote support calls to make sure he's up. Oftentimes he'd go back to sleep. So about an hour after that, we call again to make sure he's up. So he's doing better. I'd say he's attending at least 50% more of his classes, which is better than none, but he is very hard to get up in the morning. So we had to do something because mom and dad couldn't keep missing work. Emotional regulation is another support. There's an individual that I have helped. I do tell this story in my trainings, this success story of this wonderful lady. We'll call her Sue. She's over in Dauphin County, and she was very nervous. She very much was lonely, and that's a very difficult thing to say and talk about. I mean, how often, when you're in an ISP meeting, you're surrounded by your support team, it can be very intimidating to say, I'm alone. I'm sad about this, So she was frequently calling her brother multiple times. He's out of state. We're talking in the hundreds. She also was calling her supports coordinator several hundred times a day. And then obviously that's very taxing. When she wasn't getting the response she wanted, she started calling 911. We're talking at least 200-300 times a day. So with that, unfortunately, came some charges and fines because it's considered misuse of 911 emergency services, which you can't tie up these lines for obvious reasons. So, she can't afford these fines. She was in jeopardy of losing her apartment. We had come out at SafeInHome and we said, listen, Sue, or I think that was her fake name I gave her, Sue, call us instead. You don't need to call, the fire department and the police to talk about your cat or your horoscope. So she did. She started calling us all the time, anytime. And it worked out well. It was really nice. And I'm happy to say, those fines are paid off. There's no more charges dropped, and we're doing really well. It might kick up every now and then. So we also do very frequent check-in calls with her, very frequently. We call her at least 3 or 4 times a day, and she likes that. When she gets a little antsy, we have to up those times, and that's okay. We do that. Other emotional regulation, oftentimes some individuals are afraid or they just want to reach out and talk to someone. We're there. After school and work support, I think we talked about checking in with individuals during those transitional periods. Just a few examples. So here we have some success stories. I kind of like to show, examples of how we support individuals and what that might look like. So here we have Arnie. And with Arnie, this is a scenario I think that's very common for multiple supports coordinators or family members, but Arnie here lived in his own apartment and he uses local transportation to get to and from the local Goodwill. He'd worked there for a number of years. And I will say all names and faces have been changed in this presentation to protect those individuals. He is diagnosed with diabetes, anxiety, and mild IDD. Arnie does have diabetes and takes medication for that as well as his anxiety. Twice a day, Arnie also has to take his blood sugars and he needs assistance with that. So he can do it often, but struggles to do it very consistently. And it was really affecting the administration of his medication, his health and safety. His doctor expressed a lot of concern that you have to get this done consistently. His sister, Lisa, was doing that. She was leaving her home and coming to the house, but she unfortunately had a new job following COVID, and she wasn't able to do that all the time. So Arnie was really adamant that he was staying in his home. He did not want support staff coming out. He wanted to do it himself. And this is a challenge because we wanted to support Arnie in this decision and his independence and growth. So they reached out to SafeInHome. And we did. We implemented the two-way tablet and we did the check-in calls when he was supposed to receive his medications and check his blood sugars. And remote support staff had the criteria in the event his number was too low or too high, they knew to call his sister. If his number was way too high, I think over 300, they knew to immediately call 911. And I don't think they ever had to do that, but they had to check in a couple times with Lisa. He also got a geocom for on the go. He was doing well with transportation. There was only one or two hiccups. So obviously we know Arnie might not be able to stay in his home forever, but that might be true for every individual. But the fact that he's able to do it longer, is wonderful. And this is what he chooses to do. And we're happy to support him in that and his sister. Our next individual we want to review is Andre. And this is very frequent. Kind of medication management is kind of one of our most popular requests to support individuals. And I would say our second most popular request would be our overnight support scenario. So Arnie lives in his own apartment. And Andre, he does have some in-home and community staffing during the day when he's not working at his job. Andre has significant anxiety about being alone, particularly at night and in inclement weather. He's another one of our individual that does not like storms. And unfortunately, a lot of times, most of our thunderstorms tend to occur during the evening. Andre's only natural support is his mother, who's aging and lives locally. And this is a concern because obviously she might not be around forever, and we want to ensure that he has the support in her absence. When anxious, Andre will call his mother throughout the night, and she had been complaining because that's just something that's really difficult for her to deal with consistently. Andre also has a difficult time waking up for work in the morning, and he's often awake during the nighttime. Andre also loved playing video games, so it's something that we kind of were told about when all of this was being discussed. And that's concern for his continued employment. We want to make sure he could maintain his job. So in this scenario, mom was acting as Andre's alarm clock, but she was missing it, and rightfully so. She was aging and not able to keep up. So some of our most common overnight concerns, as noted by Andre, but most others, is safety and security. And that's taxing on, Andre's mother and our loved ones. Are we ensure, we're not there anymore. Andre lived at home. You're able to control your home environment. But now that he's out on his own, this is a scary thing for family members and loved ones. Are they safe? Are they secure? Who's coming to the house? A lack of in-person support is a clear concern. We've already talked about it. It's really hard kind of to get that trusted staffing in place and consistently to stay there. Elopement risks, we touched upon people that are, wandering away from the home during the night. Obviously, if you're asleep in the home, you might not always hear that, especially if you're giving care to that individual all day, you're exhausted and you kind of need some sleep. Fall risk, individuals that might fall during the night. I recently was out to support someone who his brother was he was very, very in his senior years. He was well past 80, and he was taking care of his brother who was in his 60s with an intellectual disability. His older brother had fallen and did not receive help for a couple of days. His cell phone died and the brother did not know what to do. So this was a very scary situation, which we were able to come out and support and put some supports in place for both of them. Emotional behavior supports we talked about, and medical emergencies are some of the most common overnight concerns. So we came out, we met with Andre and his team and his mom, and we gave them the two-way tablet for check-in calls. Andre would call him whenever anxious. We did the geocom again, and the geocom is a good backup because it's a cellular device. So, and God forbid in the event, the power went off or, he didn't charge his tablet, he was able to reach that geocom. Video doorbell to make sure both exits were good. Andre was a little paranoid about people coming. And then we did that alarm clock with the bed shaker to support his wake up routine. So that helped. Andre has not missed much work at all with that. We also put in a CO2 smoke detector for home and safety because Andre was just very anxious about any concerns that might arise, including fires. He was very paranoid if the lightning would strike and there would be a fire. So we put that in. That helped tremendously. He stopped calling mom as much about that. And then open door, closed sensors on exits to alert remote supports when anyone was leaving or exiting the home. And that helped Andre as well. He was just afraid. He truly was afraid at night. He didn't like the dark, but he wanted to live on his own. So here we were able to support the reduced need for in-person staff, increased independence and self-determination, and overnight safety, peace of mind for both Andre and his mom. So I know I'm talking a lot here, guys. For remote supports, a lot of questions we get also is how it's funded, and all IDDD waivers cover it as an ODP provider. So that includes the consolidated PFDS, in-home and the community living waiver, as well as the autism waiver. We do have several counties that also pay via base funding if there's a contract in place. We do take private pay in the ABLE funds. The cost comparison, in-home and community supports are typically $41 an hour. Companion are around 30, and remote supports are $9 an hour. That's not a quarter hour, that's the whole hour. So I know sometimes when we're updating plans or whatever, a support square I might put it in for quarter hour, but that's the whole hour. And that also entails when they're talking with someone, when they're typing up the weekly care notes, when we're attending ISPs, all that's just roped into that hour. And then if you want to get started, just give someone at SafeInHome a quick call. Real quick, a couple frequently asked questions we might receive, and then we see an individual that's using her tablet to connect with someone. Can you have remote supports while you live with your family? And the answer to that is absolutely. A lot of times, individuals might have a plan of moving out on their own, and I always recommend kind of starting off. You can start off in the setting with your family. Get used to it. Instead of asking mom, questions, try to call remote supports instead, so it becomes second nature. So that when you are out on your own in your own apartment, maybe, you'll have a greater sense of ease because you already know how to charge your tablet. You already know who you're connecting with. Can remote supports be used in a provider-based residential setting? Yes, we can. There was a bunch of waiver amendments recently in November. We have received some clarification on some of the ambiguity from ODP. If there's any particular questions about someone specific, just let me know. If you are in a provider-based residential setting, the technology will bill to the waiver, but the remote supports themselves will be contracted with SafeInHome to that provider directly. We do not do technology only anymore at this point, unless it's private pay. And at this time, we are not doing shared technology. It's very difficult due to the recent waiver amendments to do shared technology in provider settings. But if there is a question regarding that, you can always follow up with me after that. Do I have to choose between my in-person staff remote supports? No, you don't. We try to make a blend of things. We recognize that in-person staffing, if there's a need for that, that need will never go away. Remote support staffs cannot, drive someone to a doctor's appointment or assist someone that needs help with showering, but perhaps there's some gaps in between where we can provide that coverage and support for that individual. Will you always have the same remote support staff person? Not necessarily, but you have the same team, so you do get to know them very well. So what comes next? First and foremost, if you have someone that a loved one or an individual that you think would benefit from it, identify that person, reach out, contact your SafeInHome representative and complete the RFS, the referral form, or send over your ISP. I have the counties. I have about 12 to 14 counties, but if it's not one of my counties, I can absolutely direct you to who has that particular county. And everyone on our team is phenomenal. They care very much about the individuals we support and serve and are very knowledgeable. Schedule a meeting. We can do either virtually or in person. I love meeting in person. I like coming out to the person's home to get familiar with them, to see what they like. I love meeting everyone's pets. It's a wonderful experience for me. The next step in this is we would then, if we were moving forward with services, we develop a proposal of services for review and approval. So in a proposal, we identify goals that we're working on, similar to goals that would be within your ISP. For instance, for Arnie, we were working on medication management to increase his skill level and independence in that regard. We develop a care plan. We list all the technology you'll be using and how you'll be using your remote support hours, whether they're scheduled or support on demand. I would then type all that up. I like to give a beautiful overview of the individual and how they're utilizing their services, how those services will support that person attain those goals. And for the supports coordinator, I break down the cost in units of everything associated with that for the current fiscal year and for the following fiscal year. Once that proposal is approved, by my supervisor, I send it out to the supports coordinator, and the family can also see that. I've had families that get input of things they want added or not. And then we, once the supports coordinator and their supervisor like that gets sent on to the county for their review and approval. When that is approved, provided no adjustments need to be made, we would then schedule an onboarding and installation. Onboarding is the meeting with our client services department. They kind of review the plan, make sure they get to know the individual ahead of time. I attend that as well because I like to be good eyes and ears for that. And then we have a field services department. So they come out, they install everything. Our field service techs, they are available anytime equipment breaks. Once it's installed, they will train everyone. They will replace things. They're always available. Either they can kind of phone in from home to see how the equipment is, and if need be, they'll go out to the home anytime need be. We're there to help and support you. And then you're set. So it's pretty easy. Just reach out and have that conversation. This is everyone on our team. Again, I'm Steph McDonald. That's my email address. I will put all my information in the chat. I have Dauphin, Northumberland, Schuylkill, Lebanon, Lehigh, Northampton, Lycoming, Clinton, Harbin, Monroe Pike, Delaware, and the Philadelphia counties. That's my slideshow for right now. I do also want to say that we have, if you go to www.safeinhome.com, we have several videos, as well as if you go to YouTube and search SafeInHome, there's several videos that you can see individuals using these services in a variety of settings, either for a provider, with their family members, or on their own. Does anyone have any questions at all for me?
Hi, this is Mimi Ludwig. Thank you
Hi,
for,
Mimi.
so full disclosure, Stephanie came to visit us today and we were talking, and then she managed to go home and made it to this presentation. So, I just want to mention that we are looking to try to see if we can do something for overnight, resources, so that she's not always calling us at night. So we appreciate that, and also potentially medication management.
And do not call my dad.
Do not call my dad.
Do not call my dad. No, no.
No, not. Yeah, we'd like you to